Welcome to the Painted by Quarterly Slush Pile. Thank you for joining us today. We're here to be transparent about our editorial board process, and we have a piece of fiction to discuss with you today. That piece of fiction will live on our Painted by Quarterly podcast pages, which is at pbqmag.org. And then click on podcast, and you'll get to read this story if you'd like to read before we discuss. But before we get there, I have so much to say. And one of those things is I'm always so excited when we're doing something new. Today is also new because we have commandeered another professor's office.
Oh, cool.
Where our mobile studios. Poor Joe Zhang is currently homeless, which means we are too. As the audio studios building gets renovated, we're having to find different places in which to hang out. So we're not even in the concrete conference room that we usually are. We actually have windows today.
What?
Yeah, we have windows. Still cinder block walls, but windows and a blackboard and a little bit of art and lots and lots and lots of stuff in somebody else's office. I feel very much like we've broken in, but such is life. So I'm Kathleen Volk-Miller, and I run the graduate program in publishing here at Drexel University, and I write essays, and I think I do have to say that I have a piece that just came out in an anthology last week. The anthology is called Oprah's Book of Starting Over.
Nice.
My essay is the penultimate essay in the collection. So it's kind of fun, kind of cool. So that happened. And with me in the office today is Denise Gurin, who it's only your second podcast, right? Yeah. Well, tell us about you and your second.
Hi, Denise.
Hi, Denise.
Hi. I'm a photographer by day, and I've been on the editing staff for PBQ for, I think, almost a year now.
Wow.
Yes,
Congratulations.
Time flies when you are having a blast.
Yes.
My name is Tim Fitz, and I'm a short story writer and novelist. I'm happy to say that my novel in Korea is coming out next week, supposedly. But it seems like the real thing. There's some final stages, things going on. And I teach here at Drexel along with over 10,000 other schools.
He's a busy man.
And next to Tim and Kathy is Sarah Akett, and I am a third-year English major at Drexel, and I'm the current editorial assistant for PBQ.
Woohoo! And of course, we have Joe with us today.
Hello.
Performing the audio duties mobily. He's very talented. Hi, Marion.
Hello. Greetings, Philadelphia. This is outer space. I'm dialing in with a glass of red wine in one hand, a pumpkin candle lit on my table in front of me, and a plastic pumpkin also in front of me in honor of Halloween, because we don't actually celebrate Halloween in Abu Dhabi. I am the director of the writing program here at NYU in Abu Dhabi. And, I have to say, I've been feeling a little clobbered by the administrative workload of running a writing program. So I wanted to tell you, what I've been writing or what I've been working on, but what I've actually been working on is trying to figure out a collaboration with a visiting artist here whose name is Stu, who is a singer, songwriter, and performer who he and his collaborator Heidi Rodewald performed Passing Strange, which was a Broadway show a couple years back, where it was a sort of like really invigorating depiction of a young person, his coming of age story, and written all under the influence of great artists. He's got a new show, or rather a fairly new show called Notes of a Native Song. So they're here at Abu Dhabi this week performing Notes of a Native Song, which is based on James Baldwin's work or inspired by Baldwin's work. And they're working on yet another new play called The Mosquito Net. And they're literally on campus devising this play, developing this play. And they have agreed to let all 120 of our first year writing students sit in the black box theater while they create this play. So our students are going to be like participant observers of this theatrical creative process. And so this just happened, which is part of the reason why I'm a little late to our team. But anyway, I just wanted to share that with you because, man, you know, this writing life, it takes many forms, whether you're running a program or running around and not writing enough, but it's great to be connected up with artists in this way. So that's what I have to say.
Fabulous. Will the students get to influence the play and how it
You know what? I don't know. And when I was speaking to Stu, I was like, you realize I'm not bringing 5 people. I'm bringing like 2 chunks of more than 50, right? So I've got 50 in one group and 70 in another. And he was like, don't worry about it. I want to interact with them. I love an audience. And I think he's sort of eager to like get live feedback on the stuff that he and his ensemble are producing, which, you know, and it's a first year writing class. They're, you know, writing papers and thinking about a research paper, right? So what's the link there? I think it's going to be having students watch an artist's process, right? Watch somebody actually be in this creative decision-making mode and taking an audience and the reaction of the audience in mind as they're making those decisions, right? Like, so that I'm really, really eager to see, you know, what's the mantra? Like every writer needs a reader, right? You know, and I guess we're performing that in this sort of live, wacky, workshop-y experiment. So stay tuned. I'll report back, let you know how it goes.
Absolutely. I mean, we all know that even right. We all know even something as small as a single poem, and you read it aloud to an audience, feels different, and you can learn something from performing it, right? So I think that's terrific. Well, I'm going to switch gears entirely twice because I think we need to vote on something. Tim Fitz has been continuing his tasty cake experiments. I am here today to publicly say that he's been doing it all wrong, and I didn't want to be hypercritical on the first several conversations, but he's been eating freaking pies. Okay? The name of this company is Tasty Cake. No one eats the pies. The pies are not the thing.
No, I'm telling you, there are diehard pie eaters. There are diehard tasty cake pie eaters.
It is the cake. So today I have brought Tim the classic crimpet, the butterscotch coated crimpet, which is older than time.
So
hopefully this exact package is not. And then I also bought him the candy cakes because those are the thing. So what we have to put on before we go further is whether Tim should start putting up his comments and his family's comments on the PBQ news feed. People are. I think you did already tell us how some of these pie experiences have gone.
Yes.
And I think they could work on the PBQ news feed. Anybody, what do you guys think?
I think we should tweet them immediately.
Okay.
I can confidently say that.
At 37 grams of sugar.
I'll put that. You don't read the package, Tim.
None of it matters.
Yeah. You can't go wrong with 37 grams.
Put it in your mouth. You open the package and you put it in your mouth. That's it. Okay. All right. So stay tuned. So now to the work at hand. Today we have a piece of fiction. And oh my goodness, I should have asked this person for a phonetic spelling of her name.
Zivaljevic.
Zivaljevic. So this is Aggie Zivaljevic.
I'm guessing.
Thank you for that, Mare. And the story is called White. Would anybody care to do a synopsis? I can if nobody else wants. So this story is about a couple who gave birth far too prematurely and their baby died. Mom is an artist, and the story is told much more through Robert, the husband / father's point of view. During their recuperation time, they visit Laura's parents for an extended visit, and a lot of the story is told while they're visiting the parents. And I think that's about it for synopsis. Is there anything else we need to know moving forward? I don't think so. That's the basic plot line here. Okay. So who'd like to start? Remember, readers, listeners, you can go read if you'd like.
Well, you know what? It's funny. I wonder if it's possible, right, to maybe hear the first 2 paragraphs. And I know it's going to be on the in the show notes, but I don't know. I feel like there's a lovely incantation or incantatory aspect when we hear work aloud. So, would somebody be willing, maybe, just to read the first 2 paragraphs?
Absolutely. Okay, I'll do it. White. Before summer's end, they would be parents of a dead child. While pregnant, Laura had sculpted gigantic pink breast jars, and she trimmed their lids into smooth, shallow domes with nipple-like knobs and exhibited them in the dining room. Robert interpreted Laura's art pieces as a guidebook to his wife's essence, as the fragments of her psyche. She had thrown tall ceramic cylinders on the potter's wheel, the exotic phallic trees towering over their living room. She cooked like a painter, eggplant for purple, fresh basil for green, cold tomato soup for red, buttersquash stew for yellow, honeydew melon for orange. She constructed ceiling-high transparent cocoons of homemade paper. They were her secret rooms for transformation, and she hung them in the basement by the washer and enveloped herself with their rustling. She ripened last summer in 15-minute cycles while she washed her maternity dresses on Delicate. He had sometimes detected the sense of June or July on the sun-dried dresses she wore in August. She had decorated the nursery, whitewashed walls, white cotton sheets, a cloud mobile made of lamb's wool, the dream room. Robert took a leave of absence from his teaching job to work on a book, but mostly puttered around the house, retracing Laura's footsteps, looking at her scattered things, drawings, letters, art exhibit flyers, photos, her ceramic coffee cup, diary. He never touched anything, just investigated their nature, shape, or location, and classified them in his head as one would museum pieces. So that's the first 2 paragraphs. And I think you were dead right, Marion. It really does give us a great feel for the tone of the piece. That tone is very consistent. And the lush and exuberant details.
And the neurosis of people before they have their first. Every detail matters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're just crazy with expectations and making everything child-proof and pink, and then the child comes and poops all over the place.
You know, the surprise though of this beginning is in just like a few inches below where we stopped reading, which is, and that's how we remembered that summer, only those months before baby's death, right? Like, so the author is sort of setting you up. Aggie's setting us up for this sense of life, this robustness, this burgeoning experience, and then it gets like yanked and torqued right at the end, and you're totally destabilized by the end of the beginning.
But you know what? The first line is, before summer's end, they would be parents of a dead child.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. So the first line punches you in the face. You get lulled into expectation and then reminded, right, of that fundamental, like, wait, what? Oh shit, that's right. You know, like you've been like hoping it would go away, dreading it's real, and there it is, right?
Even with the food, like she cooked like a painter. It's still so alive, and so you can kind of see her there. And
Yeah, those are great. I mean, the first paragraph, you get a lot of sensory excitement with all the colors and the flavors, and she hits pretty much all of the five senses. I wonder a little bit about the honey melon for orange, because honeydew's green.
Yeah, I noticed that too.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just a little.
That's just a little error.
It does.
She meant cantaloupe, I think.
Yeah.
So Tim, I'm so glad you actually pointed to that, because when I was reading through this piece, I was thinking about the last time we spoke about fiction together, and it was that great piece where the raccoon falls through the ceiling.
Right.
And that actually was a moment where in our discussion, I thought, wow, Tim Fitz, naturalist and fiction critic extraordinaire, right? And I thought, as I was reading this, like there was a sort of wink at this this aspect of your interest because of the badger, right? So a few pages into the story, right, Robert, the male character, is driving, right, and comes across a badger. And I want to talk about the badger briefly, because I want to make sure I'm grasping the sort of arc of this, which is they've experienced the death of their child. They're on a visit to her parents' house, right? And then they're on the way back. Are they on the way back together, or is it just a drive by himself?
Robert's just going to
the supermarket.
Yeah,
that's what it is.
They're in Wisconsin, and Robert's just going to the store. And I do think, he's out of his element in Wisconsin as part of it. They're in this very rural. The piece grows very static, like we're apprised of the action. The sole action is baby dies, right? And now we watch Robert and Laura attempt to recover or process first, I guess. And part of that is to go to her parents' house for an extended stay in Wisconsin in the dead of winter. And the piece is very static insofar as they're drinking peppermint tea by the fire and cooking elaborate meals, and Laura's still making things and leaving her art around the house. I think that's a kind of neat core for that character. She works in many mediums, found objects and paint and paper, and right?
And she hasn't stopped processing. I noticed that throughout the piece. Like she processes being pregnant, the growing baby, and she continues to process through the death through her art. Kind of lost with Robert, like his observation of it all is very cold, feels very cold to me. And I'm not sure, I kind of want to know what he's thinking about. But also that kind of, maybe his character really speaks of how we deal with a lost child. It's like something that's very difficult for people to talk about. And you kind of see that with the parents. There's a great line about sometimes the house cat rubbed against his leg or looked at him across the room as if comparing their rank, the quality of their mutual detachment. I feel like the whole visit to the parents is kind of how an outsider deals with a child loss.
Right.
And it's very painful and very quiet and unspoken.
Right.
I think the distance between Robert and the situation is very believable, because it is sort of strange when you're having a first child, and you have to kind of make up things to do to connect yourself, because the baby's not inside you, it's inside your wife or your partner, whoever. And so everything is about the person carrying the baby. So you have to do things to connect yourself, make sure you're involved. And I mean, even if it's like shopping or cooking or something, to, I don't know, it's because it's just a strange place to be in a way. Even when the baby arrives, the baby always wants the mother, it's got to feed from the mother. And then you have to sort of go out of your way to make sure you're playing with the child and bond with the child and do things.
Yeah, it's a depressingly long time before the baby even knows dad's voice, right? The baby comes out and immediately knows mom. But I remember being really sad by that, even as a woman, that it takes a long, like 30 days or something before the baby really even recognizes dad as dad. So anyway, I thought in the writing of this that it was a super interesting choice that makes a lot of sense with the tone. I mean, I guess it's a chicken or the egg thing. Does it have this tone because it's through Robert? But Robert really isn't doing much, Denise. Like you were saying, like what is Robert doing? He's observing Laura. That's all he's really doing. And right now he's not even working. He's taken a sabbatical of some sort, and he just, even before the death occurs, he just follows her around, right? And it's her family's home. And her, he's absolutely just there for the ride, in a way.
It's funny. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say it's disappointing that we don't get more from Robert, because I do think that his silence and his ability to hold back from expressing his grief shows his strength, and I think even his love for Laura. But again, like as a reader, it's disappointing to not hear what he's thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to know, and I also, there's a couple lines where her parents are sort of keeping them away from each other.
I was wondering
and
why.
that was I want to know more about that and why they needed to protect the couple from each other, the couple that has experienced this loss, and she seems so singular in her process without him. And what does he feel about that? Yeah.
Well, I'm always, when we do fiction, I'm always in such a twist over what to reveal, Mm-hmm. But at a certain point in the story, we learn that she made herself a cradle.
Yeah.
She isn't sleeping with him. She isn't even sleeping with Robert, right?
Yeah.
And so there is this great separateness. Can anybody find that section? I know what you're talking about. I know that Robert ends up hanging out with dad and Laura hangs out with mom. That you feel there was a spot where the parents are really actually, or just making it easy for them to be apart, I think, right?
There's a line. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Her parents acted as their chaperones in bereavement, protecting them from each other until they were out of danger.
Yeah. Right.
So
right.
It explicitly states that they're keeping them from each other.
Yeah, but that makes sense given, okay, if we think about the poem / art piece of the empty boxes that he finds, right? Where it's like empty boxes with the square of the single word on top, grief, who is to blame, sorrow, I surrender. Like she's I mean, it's like, I want to say two things about this. One, this artist's art is fascinatingly consistent, right? Around being like empty containers or comments on being a vessel or something.
Mm-hmm.
And it's in that poem / those empty boxes that he sort of, dumps on the floor, that we get that who is to blame. And it could be pointing at herself, but it could also be pointing at him, right? So that natural human instinct for narrative or for closure or for a reason why things happen can easily, I imagine, blend into a kind of blaming for their predicament. And maybe that's what the parents are trying to protect them from.
Mm-hmm.
But again, I just wanted to say about her art, like it's fascinating from the start, like the cocoons in the basement, right? And then that, if I'm remembering it right, there's a nightgown taped to the wall with these like
The milk.
Plastic milk things dripping into an ice. I mean, that's so weird and wonderfully abstract.
Yeah. I think it's kind of cool that the images that get the most description and the ones that will linger after are of her art, not so much moments. Like I'm saying, nothing happens, right? This is this really passive story. We do get to reflectively look back on when the baby had to be born and passed, and they visited with the baby and all of that. But I don't think those images have the same staying power as some of the art that she makes.
Yeah, exactly. And the last thing I want to say about that too is, like, from the start, I mean, granted, Robert isn't like explicitly narrating his own psychological dilemma / reflecting on his predicament. He's telling the story of this moment, right? But we learn a ton about their relationship, the way he's sort of like just observing her art, right? Like moving through the house and observing her art. Like there's distance there, but there's also a kind of like awe and genuflection. Yeah.
And like that she's almost like a museum piece, that her whole, like it's...
Yeah. He was left in the empty house, guardian of an art gallery after closing time. She goes to therapy, a yoga class, a self-defense class, a workshop, an empty cradle support group, and he stays alone in the house.
Ouch.
So, I guess, I mean, let's go ahead. I guess we kind of have to, right? Again, with me wanting to protect the ending, but can we do a reading of what we're supposed to think? So they're off to visit the parents. They've had all this time, and they come back to their home, and they're both kind of glad to be home, even though home is where they left in such a state of grief, right? And then I think there's a hugely symbolic moment when he says, let's take down the dress. There's still a maternity dress on the line from last summer, and it's now after Christmas, right? And they take it down together. Laura helped him to get it down. They carried the dress between them toward the house.
Like a very, very much a moment of their healing is how I read that.
Yeah.
That they're starting to move forward together.
Right. Right. So everybody has that same read, because that's how I read it as well.
I read it too. I was a little worried for them when he spoke about the cradle that she made, and then was wondering whether they would sleep together when they got back. And then he does say alone in the bed that winter night, with a cradle, which led me to think that she, again, is not even on the return from the parents, that she's still not with him. And that hopefully, I felt hopeful at the end that maybe they could
I
taking
think
the dress down, connected again.
I worry a little bit about the whole thing being so much about their experience. I mean, it starts off, you find out the baby is going to be born dead. And then so I had a story in graduate school where my professor liked the story until he got to the very last line, and he said, the problem is I'm not sure if you earned the ending. It was like a kick in the stomach. But it was true, and it didn't earn the ending. And I wonder, and I feel like you start off with a line that big, you still have to earn it all the way through. And I going back to that, I wonder, looking at that paragraph, I feel like if you have a badger in the middle of the road and he gets out and walks it just doesn't seem to be, it feels like that paragraph could be cut. But it's there, and it's kind of like, in my mind, a little microcosm of the story. Here's something that's happening, and then you're kind of left just how you expect it to end. The badger's going to walk away. He didn't hit the badger and drag it, or he didn't get caught up in his car, or he didn't have some interaction. It was just this moment, which is interesting for the person in the car. It's real interesting for the person in the car, not so interesting for the friend he tells it to.
Right. I mean, The badger comes up again.
Yes.
It's what made me think it's some sort of metaphor too.
Right.
So, for how Robert is feeling. So
But I'm going to go ahead and say, when he brings the badger back up, it felt a bit overwrought to me. Yeah. Sarah just said forced, and I felt like that was a rather overwrought moment. In case you didn't get the meaning of the badger, here's some more. And that graph, the language in it is a little over much. I don't know if I should read it or not, but he thought of the badger marching through the snow, the white mark on its forehead moving through the darkness, a living creature striding through the snowdrifts, leaving tracks in a frozen world. He found comfort in it, and at last slipped into soundless dream.
Yeah, that type of over romanticization of animals. I mean, that's just what the badger does. Just he's just looking for mice. It's just.
I think.
I mean, it's. Yeah, I don't see any.
I felt like what was stronger that told me more about Robert was the different signs that he saw, like all these can be iced. Just ask. Like things like Illinois welcomes you. Please buckle up. Like the little signs that he kind of noticed throughout, I felt told me more about him than the badger. Like his like
what he notices.
What he notices and how kind of ridiculous that can seem. A sign like that can seem when you're in a hospital and your baby has died. Like just little things like that. And that made me feel more connected to him than the badger did.
But I feel like the baby has to be more than just about their grief. It has to reach out off the page into somewhere else that pertains to the I don't know, has to be more than just about their grief. I mean, I find myself thinking, is this about the writer's experience working through it? And if it's fiction, it's different than nonfiction because it has to represent. I'm not sure what it represents. I'm not sure what the figurative language is of that baby, because it starts off that way, and I know what's going to happen, and I'm expecting by the second sentence that it's going to be about the grieving process, and then it's about the grieving process, and it's sad. But, and if it's a real people, then it's it's different because these are real people going through it. But when they're characters, we're kind of sociopaths when we think about characters. We like seeing characters getting killed off. You can kill off a character and you go like, yay, they died. Joyce Carol Oates' stories. The girl gets dragged off by a psychopath or raped and murdered. You think, okay. I mean, it's a story, so we don't have the same emotional connection. And so we're sort of pulled in to have this emotional connection. And then the surprises kind of fail to appear. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Lots of good things going along on the way.
Right.
A lot of things are working.
Right, and I do think we're more judgy. I don't know if I should use that word, but when it's a fictional person than when it's a human being in their story. When she came back home and stitched the pillow out of the hair that she shorn from her own, that was way a lot for me. I was having a hard time, not having an eye roll.
The whole the entire part where she shaved her head turned me off as well. Even before she sewed the pillow, just when she cut her hair, I just felt like it was a trite metaphor for,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, we've certainly seen that before, right? A person goes through some kind of psychological trauma and they shave their head.
Cleansing.
Yeah, that's not.
Has to get them like every 6 weeks in college.
Need a lot of cleansing in college.
So I feel like some of the metaphors in here are forced, but some of them are great.
Right.
Like how Denise said, the signs.
Mm-hmm.
That was great. It was just so natural,
right.
and it works really well.
Right. Certain details, the healthy choice dinners piling up in the trash.
Yeah.
When they're still living very separate lives. That's such a specific, concrete detail. It's great.
I mean, I do like the distance between the couple when it happens, because I mean that that's an interesting phenomenon where sometimes people see as only one person's allowed to grieve for a lost baby just because the woman's carrying it, and of course it's not the case. But maybe there are two different types of grief. That's probably happening.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly,
Sure.
to have the physical grief too.
Sure. I mean, there would be among two women who lost babies at the same exact age, right?
Yeah.
It's two different people are processing.
Yeah.
Right. Even if it's the same loss.
And
Right.
the parents, I felt really connected to that part, kind of them visiting the parents and how the parents were treating them with this sort of fragility and with food and gardening and walking and always kind of circling around the grief but never ever addressing it. And he at some point Robert says that he felt like it was like not gracious anymore to even bring it up, and that speaks a lot to the situation that they're in. It's so hard to talk about, and what can you say?
Right.
I thought that was really that worked really well for me.
Yeah, I feel like this is kind of an interesting commentary on what happens when the children of helicopter parents grow up. And even when they experience grief, they're going to be circling and making sure you're okay, and how awful that would be.
Yeah.
Constantly
Right.
offered a Kleenex, and because you just got to go through sadness.
Yeah, but I mean, they went to visit. Of course, the parents are going to offer the peppers or tea.
I didn't see them as helicopter parents. So.
But you would go back to your parents. You would, it's not unnatural, but it would just, you would think it might make things easier, but it probably does not make things easier.
Well, not for Robert.
Yeah.
I mean, they were happy to be home after they left, so.
Yeah, they were happy to get back home, which is a good sign.
Yeah.
Guys, I think we really need to start narrowing this conversation into a voting situation. And not that we have to vote yet, but we have to start getting to the vote, I think. I think Sarah might have summed it up really well for me. I think there's so much good in here, but I also want to take out a red at many moments. There's just, it's just 20% overdone. Tim, I don't want to put you on the spot, but you said that maybe that ending isn't deserved. Is that
Maybe not the ending, but after this first line, I'm not sure if the first line is maybe earned, because it doesn't go beyond a family grieving. It's it's a uneven grieving between the couple, and Robert's left out of it, and but it's still, I'm not sure if it is surprising in any way or speaks beyond the experience. I mean, I remember at the morning of 9/11, I remember thinking of how useless boring stories are, or stories that don't speak to outside a family unit or even the country. These stories have to do more, because I feel like America was sleepwalking for a long time before 9/11, and that you just have to have it in some way. It can be very subtle, or probably subtle, but in some way it has to do bigger things. It's just it's a difficult thing to ask of a short story, but still. And I think this story does speak to that family, but I'm not sure once I read that first line if I have any sort of transformation beyond that I care too much about.
right?
So I'm not sure if I think starting it off with that line could go dramatically one direction or the other. I'm not sure if it lives up to that first line.
Yeah, I'm not a fan of starting with that line. It sets me up to not be like, I don't know how to say it. Like, I mean, that's like a really sad thing. So, okay, you got me, right? Like, there's somehow,
moving it would
I'm
work
wondering,
really well.
Yeah.
when I read that first line, I think I might upload this out. To balance out what's going on.
Right.
unless it's going to really just turn me on the whole day, get me thinking about stuff.
Yeah.
Like replaying scenes and doing all that stuff that a great story does.
Right.
I feel like the author was trying not to make that sentence like a shock value. However, I feel like it was poorly executed, as you said. So, and not putting it later in the story, it's just there. Let's move on. But you don't really move on. You're kind of stuck on that,
Right.
just like Robert and Laura.
Right.
So
how can it have shock value if it starts with it, right?
yeah.
Yeah.
Which is why I feel like they put it here, but
yeah,
to not make it so trivial. But I don't think that could ever be.
Well,
right. It could never be trivial. It's powerful enough, right?
Yeah.
I want to jump in and say two things. One is American Beauty, right? Remember the film American Beauty from a million years ago? It actually starts with Kevin Spacey's character announcing that he's dead, right? And then you find yourself like falling for the narrative and falling for him over the course of the movie, forgetting that he's dead until like the last 10 minutes or so, and you're like, oh shit, he's gonna die, right? So you've got that like arc of experience in that film. So I kind of get why this writer would start with that line, but then I think the story falls short of the mark because of what Tim's been saying. Like fiction, short stories, like in the stories that they tell are always pointing at this other thing. And I don't know if it's another thing outside of the story itself, right? Or something bigger in the culture, as much as it's like pointing to the maneuvers of storying, right? Like that you're actually able to trust the architecture of the story as it unfolds. So you're falling in love with the author's craft, and then forgetting the craftsmanship, right, as that's happening, so that you're in the world of the piece. And I think with the critique of the metaphors, critique of some of these like slightly clunky lines, like I'm aware of the author in a way that makes me fall out of the world of the story in a way, which that takes me back to that point somebody made, I think it was Tim, about like 15 minutes ago, and maybe Kathy too, this distinction between fiction and nonfiction, right? If this were an essay, right, I think my orientation toward it would be so different than approaching it like a piece of fiction, a piece of, well, a short story, right? And thinking of it as a short story without this like center or without this other thing that it's pointing towards, I can't like fully lose myself in it, right? And although I'm close, like I'm really find myself really like moved in places, but then also moved out of it in places. So yeah, for what it's worth, I love listening to people talk about fiction. You make me really, really hard about the way fiction works. Thank you.
Denise, any closing words before we vote?
I think that Marion really summed it up. I'm kind of, I want more. I want more Robert. That's what I want. I wanted to, that was the mystery.
You want to know him better.
I want to know him. Yeah. I wanted to know more there. Because there's so many beautiful, I want to see her art, really. I really fell in love with that. But I'd like to be less of an observer and move.
Okay.
Marion, you said a story needs to make you forget about the craft. And I thought it's interesting you said that, because I feel like when you're writing a story, you don't really know how you get into it, but you get into one of those flow zones where you look up from writing and the lights changed outside and the surroundings.
Yeah.
And when you're reading a great story, the same thing happens. And you don't get in there, you're not really sure why you're not getting in there. So it's maybe this or this, but sometimes it's a little mysterious too.
Yeah.
How you get there and how you, as a reader and a writer. I mean, certainly the more you thinking about it doesn't help it.
Right. So I you know what, Tim, I have to like footnote myself here, which is to say I picked up Orhan Pamuk's book called The Naive and Sentimental Novelist, and it's a series of lectures that he's made about the subtitle is Understanding What Happens When We Write and Read Novels. So that's been in the background of my head. But listening to you guys talk this through, like, I think you're absolutely right. Like the naive reader, the naive novelist is all about the flow of the story. But that sentimental novelist, the sentimental reader, is really quite interested in craftsmanship, right? The choices that the writer's making. But Pamak's point is like, it's smack in the middle there, right? It's really those two things that happen where the sweet spot is, right? And like that, it just seems like a really like useful way of thinking about both the practice of reading and the practice of writing fiction.
Yeah. Okay. Shall we?
Yeah.
All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3, vote. Okay. We really hope we see this piece again someday, but we're going to reject it for now.
Okay.
Yep, thank you so much, Aggie Zivaljevic. And thank you for letting us discuss it. And listeners would be so happy to hear what you have to say as well. Go to our Facebook event page that corresponds with this episode, and let us know if you think we've made the right decision after you see this piece. So we have a few more minutes, I think. Shall we talk about, so that we still end on a positive note, talk about what's making us happy this week? My stolen directly from Pop Culture Happy Hour. Yeah, I don't care. Let her come after me. It's meant as only the highest form of flattery. I love it.
Okay, I'm going to go for music right now.
Okay.
Nice.
And I'm listening to this band called Joseph, and it's 3 sisters.
Ooh.
And they have 2 albums out called Native Dreamer Kin and I'm Alone, No You're Not. And I'm just totally into it, especially the first one. I really like the first one.
Wait, you have a physical CD?
I did. They were in. I know. It's so weird.
What?
It's so weird.
Is that what this is? Wait,
is.
I can't eat it. I'm trying to. What? Can you hear it, Marion?
I hear something. That sounds like
it's a
material form of music.
Well, I got a new car, and it doesn't have a MP3 player because it's a new car, but an old car.
New to you car.
New to me car. So I'm the old.
That's
CDs.
Terrific. How did you get turned on to them?
A friend of mine.
Yeah.
And I just really like them.
Cool. Super cool.
I have 2 things that are making me happy.
Of course you do, Tim. Tasty cakes and...
I went to the Highland Orchards this Sunday, and although the apple picking was closed, they were selling apple cider
nice.
donuts. And this was the first time I've ever had one donut where the second donut was equally as good as the first donut.
That's a lifetime high point. Nice.
And the second thing that I'm really happy about is I'm watching a bunch of old Jerry Reed videos on YouTube where he's playing guitar with Chet Atkins. And there's an amazing, Chet Atkins is like he's the king of finger picking. And there's a video where Jerry Reed's playing, he's just tearing it up. And then it's Chet Atkins' turn to do his run. And he realizes that Jerry Reed now, you can see at the moment on his fingers that he is now the student, where Jerry Reed surpasses.
Cool.
It's really fantastic. And he was happy about it too. They were great friends.
Yeah.
So this was something that I'm watching.
Wow.
Very cool.
Okay, so I am currently happy that a month into living together, me and my 3 other roommates not only get along, but I can confidently say that we are all friends.
Yay!
Yeah,
Yay!
it's a rarity, so yeah.
That should make you happy. And we'll keep checking in on her and see how that goes. Yay! For now! Yay!
Well, speaking of friends, I want to jump in and say I'm delighted to be expecting Jason Schneiderman here in Abu Dhabi. So he's coming for a brief visit. I'm very stoked.
That's why he's not on air with us right now, is because he is in the air right now.
Because he's mid-air, right? So he should be landing in a couple of hours, and hopefully I'll see him shortly. But the thing that made me very happy was this moment of delightful confusion. I picked up the copy of Vanity Fair with Bruce Springsteen on the cover. And I am forever in awe of the photographs that Kathleen took with Bruce Springsteen when he was in town, because he's looking directly in her eyes and they're having this moment of total communion. But Vanity Fair did a review of his memoir, and I like gobbled up the review, flipped the page, a couple pages later, there's a photo spread, and this is the thing that made me very happy. There's a photo spread that made me very confused. So it is of Donald Trump in the White House with a nurse putting on prosthetic fingers. And the lens is like really kind of hazy and fuzzy. And for a little while, I actually thought it was real. Like I thought, oh my God, they have pictures of Donald Trump in the White House, and like, what's this? And they're putting on prosthetic fingers, prosthetic digits to extend the length of his fingers. And then that's like the first of a series of really irreverent photographs that made me confused. Like I didn't know for sure what reality was. And, you know, I offer you that because we're coming up on the election and it's hard to know what reality is these days.
Well, by the time this airs, we will know if Donald Trump is in the White House. Or not. So, and that's about exactly right, that the cuckoo clock would go up now.
Exactly.
After Marion shared what's making her confused this week. It's 8 p.m. in Abu Dhabi.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, and it's high noon here. So I have a kind of like a double pronged what's making me happy. I know I've said it on this podcast that I'm addicted to podcasts. I am. And those of you who know me personally also know that I have tremendous sleep issues. I have terrible, I just can't sleep, basically. And so some of the podcasts I listen to are to help me with that. And one of them is called Miette's Bedtime Stories. And this beautiful woman with an amazing accent reads stories. And it's so nice. Oh, you should see the faces of the people in this room. Everybody's going to be listening to Miette. And honestly, I am such a consumer of everything, right? I just consume. I'm reading, listening, consuming all the time. But never has this ever happened to me. She read a story called Drowning Doesn't Look Like Drowning by Heather Birrell. It did not put me to sleep. It made me go on Amazon and immediately buy the collection.
Oh, nice.
Oh my gosh, I am digging this collection of short stories. The collection is called Mad Hope, and I'm just in awe. Every story is as powerful as the one that Miette read, and it starts with one called Brianna Susanna Alana. And it reminds me so much of George Saunders' Victory Lap, which a couple of you know is one of my favorite stories of all time. And this woman is I want to contact Heather Birrell and ask her if she has anything for us. And I want you all to read her immediately. So that happened. And that's happening. I'm still reading it right now because I'm saving Bruce Springsteen's memoir till break. Because I want to be able to just like unplug, check out, and read it from the beginning to the end, you know? So, okay. Anything else, anybody?
Tasty cake.
Tasty cake. Well, stay tuned for Tasty Cake reports, PBQ News feed, social media.
I'll have a write-up by Friday.
Oh, Marion, are you still there? I think we may have lost our Abu Dhabi friend. Oh, maybe Jason showed up. All right. So please follow us on social media. Go to our website, pbqmag.org, and check out this story and all of our podcasts. Subscribe, rank us, send us self-addressed stamped envelopes, and we'll send you stickers. And keep reading. Thank you. Woo!